My name is Ethan. I'm 30 years old, and in 3 weeks I was supposed to walk down the aisle with my beautiful fiancée Haley, with my parents proudly by my side. Instead, they'll be attending my sister Brooke's housewarming party because I refused to invite her to our wedding after she punched me in the face at our engagement dinner. The silver lining: my grandparents stepped up to walk me down the aisle, showing me what unconditional family support really means. Before I dive into this family drama, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing your ground even when it hurts. I grew up in a seemingly normal middle-class family in suburban Michigan. My parents, Robert and Margaret, provided a comfortable life for my sister Brooke and me. We had a nice 4-bedroom house with a backyard big enough for barbecues and birthday parties. Dad worked as a bank manager while Mom taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, but inside our home, things were different. From my earliest memories, I noticed how my parents treated Brooke differently. She was 2 years older than me, and somehow that gave her special status in our household. When we were kids, I thought maybe it was because she was the firstborn, or because she was a girl. As I got older, I realized it was more complicated than that. My parents didn't just favor her. They excused behaviors in her that would have earned me serious consequences. The first major incident I remember happened when I was 8. Brooke and I were playing in the backyard when she wanted my new remote control car that I had received for my birthday just a week earlier. When I refused to hand it over, she grabbed it and threw it against the fence, breaking it into pieces. When I ran inside crying to tell my parents, they said, "Brooke just gets passionate sometimes. You need to learn to share better. No punishment for her, and no replacement car for me." By contrast, my maternal grandparents, Richard and Eleanor, always treated us equally. When they visited, or when we stayed at their lake house during summers, I felt completely loved and valued. They would listen to both of us, enforce the same rules, and distribute affection equally. Those summers became my sanctuary, the place where I felt normal and appreciated. As we entered our teenage years, Brooke's behavior worsened. When I was 14, she became enraged when I was chosen for the lead in the school play instead of her friend. She waited until our parents went out for dinner, then came into my room and shredded my script along with a science project that was due the next day. When I showed my parents the evidence, my mother sighed and said, "Your sister is going through a lot with hormones and social pressure. You need to be more understanding." My father added, "Maybe next time don't compete for things when you know she wants them for her friends." The third significant incident came during my high school graduation party. Brooke, then in her 2nd year of college, showed up 3 hours late and clearly intoxicated. When attention shifted to my academic achievements and college plans, she knocked over the entire refreshment table, ruining the food and breaking several of my mother's serving dishes. While guests helped clean up the mess, my parents took Brooke upstairs to rest. Later, they explained to me that she's struggling with the attention not being on her. You know how sensitive she is. Over time, I learned to keep the peace by downplaying my achievements, avoiding conflicts with Brooke, and essentially making myself smaller to accommodate her outsized presence and emotions. I became the family peacekeeper, the one who would apologize, even when I wasn't wrong, the one who would give up what I wanted to prevent Brooke from exploding. When it came time for college, I threw myself into applications and was rewarded with a full scholarship to a university in California. The distance was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I could breathe without walking on eggshells. I made friends who valued me, professors who recognized my talents, and gradually built a life based on mutual respect rather than constant appeasement. After graduation, I secured a position at a prestigious architectural design firm in San Francisco. My career flourished as I developed my own style and contributed to award-winning projects. I maintained contact with my family through obligatory holiday calls and occasional visits, but always kept a healthy emotional distance. My grandparents remained my strongest family connection, visiting me in California twice a year and always expressing pride in the man I had become. 2 years ago, everything changed when I met Haley. I was in Chicago for a business conference, rushing to my next session when I literally bumped into her at a coffee shop, spilling her latte all over both of us. Mortified, I insisted on buying her a new drink and giving her my conference hoodie to cover the stain. What was supposed to be a quick apology turned into a 2-hour conversation, and by the end we had exchanged numbers and made plans for dinner that evening. Haley worked as a pediatric physical therapist, helping children with mobility issues. Her compassion, combined with a quick wit and grounded perspective, captivated me immediately. We started dating long distance with me in San Francisco, and her in Chicago. But after 6 months, I transferred to my firm's Chicago office to be closer to her. What struck me most about Haley was her family. The Andersons welcomed me immediately, including me in Sunday dinners and family game nights. Her parents, David and Karen, treated me with genuine interest and respect. Her brother Michael teased me good-naturedly, but always made me feel like one of them. It was a revelation to experience a family where love didn't come with conditions, where disagreements were discussed openly, without lingering resentment, and where everyone's achievements were celebrated equally. After a year and a half of dating, I knew Haley was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, getting down on one knee at sunset on the same beach where we had had our third date. When she said yes, I felt like my real life was finally beginning. With Haley by my side, I could build the kind of family I had always wanted but never had. The wedding planning began with excitement. Haley and I agreed on a medium-sized ceremony with about 120 guests, a mix of family and close friends. We found a beautiful venue on the outskirts of Chicago, a converted barn with exposed beams and twinkling lights that could accommodate both the ceremony and reception. Despite my complicated relationship with my family, I initially planned for traditional roles. My father would walk me down the aisle, my mother would help with certain aspects of planning, and yes, Brooke would be invited. I wanted to believe that for one day my family could function normally and share in my happiness. How wrong I was. 6 months before our wedding date, Haley and I traveled to Michigan to visit my parents and share our engagement news in person. Though they already knew from our phone call, we wanted to show them the ring and discuss some preliminary wedding ideas. The visit started pleasantly enough. Mom had prepared my favorite meal pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes, and Dad had bought a bottle of champagne for a toast. They seemed genuinely happy for us, asking about the proposal and complimenting Haley's ring. "We're thinking about a September wedding," Haley told them as we sat in the living room after dinner. "Nothing too elaborate but meaningful." "September is lovely," my mother replied already, pulling out her phone to check her calendar. "The weather should be perfect." My father nodded approvingly. "Just enough time to plan something nice, but not so long that you kids have to wait forever." It felt surreal to have their undivided positive attention. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe with Haley in the picture, the dynamics could change. Maybe they could see me differently through her eyes. That illusion shattered when the front door slammed open, and Brooke stormed in without knocking. At 32, my sister still acted like the house and everyone in it existed for her convenience. She wore designer jeans and a silk blouse, her dark hair cut in an expensive bob that framed her face. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, though no one had mentioned expecting her. Traffic was a nightmare. My stomach instantly knotted. My parents hadn't mentioned inviting Brooke to our dinner, and I would have preferred to share our news with her separately in a more controlled environment. But of course they had included her without asking me. "Brooke, look who's here," my mother said excitedly. "Ethan and Haley came to visit. They're getting married in September." Brooke's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at us. "Oh, right. The engagement. Congratulations." Her tone made the word sound like an accusation rather than a celebration. "Thank you, Haley," said warmly, extending her hand. "It's nice to see you again, Brooke." Brooke briefly shook Haley's hand before turning to me. "September, huh? Pretty quick planning. Any particular reason for the rush?" The implication was clear, and I felt my face flush with anger. "No rush," I replied evenly. "We've been together for 2 years and we know what we want." My mother, ever the peacekeeper when it came to Brooke, quickly intervened. "Isn't it exciting? Our first family wedding, Brooke, come sit down. I saved you some dessert." Throughout dinner, Brooke made passive-aggressive comments about everything from the venue location, Chicago really so far from family, to our honeymoon plans, Hawaii is so basic. Everyone goes there. Haley maintained her composure, admirably responding to each barb with grace, and redirecting the conversation to neutral topics. After dessert, we moved to the living room to look at some venue photos on Haley's tablet. That's when Brooke started bringing up past incidents, reframing them to make herself the victim. "Remember when Ethan got that full scholarship and left us all behind?" she said casually to Haley. Mom cried for weeks. I was pursuing my education. I responded, trying to keep my voice calm, and Mom said she was proud of me. "Sure, but you never came home after that. Too good for your family, I guess." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but said nothing to defend me. My mother simply looked down at her hands. "Ethan speaks very fondly of his family." Haley interjected, placing her hand on mine. "He was just telling me about your family trips to Mackinac Island." Brooke ignored her, focusing entirely on me now. "You always got everything handed to you. The grades, the scholarship, the fancy job, and now the perfect fiancé from the perfect family." Her voice dripped with resentment. "That's not fair, Brooke," I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. "I worked hard for everything I've achieved." "Oh, right. Poor Ethan, always working so hard while the rest of us had it easy." "I never said that." The tension in the room was palpable. My parents sat frozen, as they always did when Brooke's temper flared. Haley squeezed my hand supportively. "Maybe we should look at those photos another time," my mother suggested weakly. Brooke wasn't finished. "So where am I in this wedding plan? Let me guess. You want me to be a bridesmaid and pretend we're all one big happy family for your Chicago friends?" "We haven't finalized the wedding party yet," I replied carefully. "We're still working out details." That's when Brooke stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You're not even going to ask me to be in the wedding, are you? After everything I've done for you?" I was genuinely confused. "Everything you've done, Brooke? What are you talking about?" "I've supported you. I've been there for you. I introduced you to Amanda in high school, and look how you treated her." This was absurd. Amanda was Brooke's friend who had asked me to prom when her date canceled at the last minute. We went, had an okay time, and never dated afterward. This was somehow being presented as a massive betrayal. "That was 15 years ago, and it was one dance," I said, standing up as well. "What does that have to do with anything? It's just another example of how you take everything for granted. You think you're so perfect with your perfect job and your perfect fiancé. Some of us have real problems, Ethan." "I never claimed to be perfect. And everyone has problems, Brooke. The difference is how we handle them." That's when it happened. Something in Brooke's eyes changed, a flash of pure rage that I'd seen before but never directed so intensely at me. Before anyone could react, she lunged forward and punched me directly in the face. Her fist connected with my left cheekbone with surprising force, sending me stumbling backward. Haley gasped and jumped up. "Ethan." She rushed to my side as I regained my balance, touching my face gently where the blow had landed. For a moment, everyone froze in shock. I stood there, hand to my throbbing face, staring at my sister in disbelief. Blood trickled from a small cut where her ring had caught my skin. "Brooke," my mother finally exclaimed, but her tone held more surprise than anger. My father stood up slowly. "Now, let's all calm down." He wasn't looking at me, but at Brooke, whose chest was heaving with emotion. "He deserved it," Brooke spat. "He always thinks he's better than everyone." What happened next hurt more than the punch. Instead of checking if I was okay or reprimanding Brooke, both my parents moved toward her. My mother put her arm around Brooke's shoulders, while my father stood protectively in front of her as if I might retaliate. "She didn't mean it," my mother said to me while consoling Brooke. "You know how she gets when she's upset." Haley looked from them to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "She just assaulted him," she said quietly. "And you're comforting her." My father frowned. "You don't understand our family dynamics. Brooke is very sensitive." "I think we should go," I said, the side of my face throbbing, and my heart hurting even more. "Haley, let's get our things." "Ethan, don't be dramatic," my mother pleaded. "Brooke is sorry, aren't you, honey?" Brooke, now crying theatrical tears, nodded without actually verbalizing an apology. "I'm not being dramatic," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm being sensible. We're going to a hotel for the night and we'll fly back to Chicago tomorrow." As Haley and I gathered our overnight bags, my parents continued to console Brooke in the living room. Neither of them came to check on me or to help us with our departure. When we walked out the front door, no one called after us or tried to stop us. In the rental car, Haley gently examined my face under the dome light. "You might have a bruise, but I don't think anything's broken," she said softly. "I have some pain relievers in my purse." After swallowing the pills with some water from her bottle, I sat in silence, staring through the windshield at the dark suburban street. Ethan, Haley said carefully, "Has something like this happened before?" I sighed deeply. Not the punching. That's new. But the behavior, the way my parents responded, that's been my whole life. "It's not normal," she said firmly. "It's not okay." "I know," I replied, finally turning to look at her. "And I'm done pretending it is." As we drove to the nearest hotel, I made a decision that would change my relationship with my family forever. Brooke would not be invited to our wedding, and if my parents couldn't accept that, they wouldn't be welcome either. After returning to Chicago, Haley and I tried to refocus on our wedding plans. We had secured a beautiful venue, a converted barn with string lights and exposed wooden beams that created a rustic yet elegant atmosphere. We had chosen a color scheme of navy blue and silver, hired a local band known for their versatile playlist, and selected a menu featuring both of our favorite foods. In the initial planning, I had envisioned my father walking beside me down the aisle, my mother helping with decorations, and yes, even Brooke, attending as a guest, though not as part of the wedding party. The incident at my parents' house changed everything. For the first week after returning home, I avoided their calls, needing time to process what had happened and what it meant for our relationship moving forward. When I finally did answer, my mother acted as if nothing unusual had occurred. "We were thinking about the rehearsal dinner," she said cheerfully. "Your father and I would like to host it at that Italian restaurant you liked as a teenager. What was it called? Romano's?" "Mom," I interrupted, "we need to talk about what happened during our visit." A pause. "Oh, Ethan, you know how Brooke gets. She's been under so much stress lately with her new job and the house she's buying. She didn't mean anything by it. She punched me in the face, Mom. I had a bruise for a week." "Well, you did provoke her with that comment about handling problems." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this pattern was exactly why I had moved across the country in the first place. "I've made a decision, Mom. Brooke is not invited to our wedding." The silence that followed was thick with tension. When my mother finally spoke, her voice had lost all its cheerfulness. "You can't be serious. She's your sister." "I am serious. I will not have someone at my wedding who physically attacked me and has never shown any remorse for it." She was emotional. "You know how she is." "That's exactly the problem, Mom. Everyone always says you know how she is instead of expecting her to behave like a reasonable adult. I'm done accepting that as an excuse." The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother alternated between guilt trips, "this will break her heart" dismissals. "It was just one little incident," and outright manipulation. "If you loved your family, you would forgive her." When none of that worked, she tried a different tack. "If Brooke isn't invited, your father and I will have to reconsider attending." Those words, though painful, weren't entirely surprising. "That's your choice to make," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the hurt. "I hope you'll choose to support me, but I understand if you can't." Haley was incredible throughout this period. Having grown up in a family where boundaries were respected and accountability was expected, she struggled to understand my parents' behavior, but never questioned my decisions. She consulted with her own parents, who suggested we meet with a family therapist to discuss healthy ways to handle the situation. The therapist, Dr. Lawson, helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my well-being and for the health of my future marriage. "You're not excluding your sister on a whim," she explained during one session. "You're protecting yourself and your special day from someone who has demonstrated harmful behavior and shown no accountability for it." After several weeks of consideration and counsel, Haley and I decided to hold a formal family meeting to clearly communicate our decision. We invited my parents to meet us at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant where we could talk without interruptions. When we arrived, my parents were already seated, their expressions somber. My father, usually silent on family matters, seemed unusually agitated. "Before we begin," I said, after we ordered drinks, "I want to thank you both for coming. This isn't easy, but it's important that we're clear about expectations for the wedding." My mother nodded stiffly. "We understand you're upset about what happened, but family is family, Ethan." "That's actually what I want to discuss," I continued. "After careful consideration, Haley and I have decided that Brooke will not be invited to our wedding. This isn't about punishment or holding grudges. It's about creating a safe, positive environment for one of the most important days of our lives." My father leaned forward, his face reddening. "This is ridiculous. She made one mistake." "It's not just one mistake, Dad. It's a pattern of behavior that's gone on my entire life, and the fact that neither of you acknowledges how serious it was concerns me deeply." "So, you're just going to cut your sister out of your life?" my mother asked, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm not cutting her out of my life," I clarified. "I'm setting a boundary for our wedding day. In the future, if Brooke shows genuine remorse and makes real changes in how she treats me, we can revisit our relationship. Has it occurred to you that maybe you owe her an apology too?" My father suggested, his tone accusatory. "For provoking her." Beside me, Haley tensed. I placed my hand over hers before responding. "I didn't provoke her, Dad. Disagreeing with someone isn't provocation for violence." The conversation circled like this for nearly an hour. My parents defending Brooke, minimizing the incident, and suggesting compromises that all involved me giving in while expecting nothing from my sister. I remained firm but respectful, even as their arguments became increasingly emotional and at times manipulative. Finally, my mother delivered the ultimatum I had been dreading but half expecting. If Brooke isn't welcome, then we don't feel we can attend either. It would break her heart to know we went without her. Despite anticipating this possibility, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a wave of pain through me. I looked at my father, hoping he might disagree, but he nodded in solidarity with my mother. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm disappointed, but I respect your decision." As we prepared to leave, my father added a final blow. "You should know that Brooke is closing on her new house soon. She's planning a housewarming party around the same time as your wedding. We've already committed to helping her with that." The coincidence seemed too perfect to be accidental. Later, I would learn from my cousin Rachel that Brooke had deliberately scheduled her housewarming for our wedding weekend after learning from my parents that she wouldn't be invited. The drive home from that meeting was silent. When we arrived at our apartment, I finally broke down. All the emotions I had carefully controlled during the confrontation came pouring out: anger, grief, disappointment, and a profound sense of rejection. Haley held me as I processed the reality that my parents had chosen my sister's housewarming party over my wedding day. "I knew they always favored her," I said through tears, "but I never thought they'd miss our wedding. Even with everything that's happened, I still thought at the end of the day they'd choose to be there." Haley wiped my tears gently. "Their choice reflects on them, not on you. They're missing out on something beautiful because they can't set proper boundaries with your sister. That's their loss." In the days that followed, I oscillated between grief and determination. There were moments when I considered giving in, inviting Brooke just to have my parents present. But each time that thought arose, I remembered the therapist's words about breaking unhealthy patterns, and I recommitted to our decision. Our wedding would proceed as planned. We would adapt to the absence of my parents, and somehow we would find joy in the day despite the family-shaped hole in our celebration. With my parents officially not attending our wedding, Haley and I faced the task of reimagining certain traditional elements of the ceremony. Who would walk me down the aisle? Who would give the parent toasts? How would we handle inevitable questions from guests about my family's absence? Haley never wavered in her support. When well-meaning friends suggested that maybe we should just invite Brooke to keep the peace, Haley firmly shut down those suggestions. "This isn't about keeping the peace," she told her college roommate Lisa, who had raised the idea during a brunch. "This is about starting our marriage with healthy boundaries. Ethan deserves to feel safe and respected at his own wedding." Her parents, David and Karen Anderson, were equally supportive. During a Sunday dinner at their home, Karen broached the subject carefully. "We want you to know that we understand your decision completely," she said, refilling my water glass. "No one should have to tolerate abuse, family or not." David nodded in agreement. And if there's anything we can do to make the day special for both of you, just name it. I'm pretty good at father-son talks if you need one before the big day. He winked, lightening the moment while offering genuine support. My closest friends also rallied around me. Jason, my college roommate and best man, called as soon as he heard about my parents' decision. "That's their loss, man," he said firmly. "And for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Remember that time in sophomore year when my dad showed up drunk to parents' weekend? You helped me realize that loving someone doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior." My colleagues at the architectural firm organized a special lunch the week after my parents delivered their ultimatum. They presented me with a card signed by everyone in the office and a gift certificate for a couple's massage for Haley and me. "Weddings are stressful enough without family drama, my boss," Marcus said quietly as he handed me the envelope. "Take care of yourself through this. We've got your back here." The most unexpected support came from my maternal grandparents. 3 weeks after the confrontation with my parents, I received a phone call from my grandmother, Eleanor. "Ethan, dear, your grandfather and I just heard about what's happening with the wedding," she began, her voice steady, despite her 80 years. "We want you to know that we think you're handling this exactly right." Tears sprang to my eyes at her words. "You do?" "Absolutely. We've watched this dynamic with Brooke for years, and frankly, we've had more than one argument with your parents about how they've enabled her behavior. What she did was assault, plain and simple, and the fact that they're choosing her housewarming over your wedding is, well, it's disgraceful." My grandfather Richard took the phone. "Son, we want you to know that if you'll have us, we'd be honored to take on your parents' roles at the wedding. I may be old, but I can still walk you down that aisle with my head held high." Their offer brought fresh tears, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. "I'd love that, Grandpa, more than you know." My grandmother came back on the line, and I already called your mother and told her exactly what I think of her decision. She's my daughter and I love her, but she's dead wrong on this one. The image of my tiny grandmother confronting my mother made me smile despite everything. I bet that was quite a conversation. Oh, it was. Richard had to take the phone away when I started using language not appropriate for a woman my age. Her dry humor had always been one of my favorite things about her. With my grandparents stepping into parental roles, we began reshaping our wedding plans. The venue remained the same, as did our color scheme and most of the details we had lovingly selected. But certain traditions needed adjusting. My grandfather would walk me down the aisle, a role he embraced with pride. "I'll need to get my good suit pressed," he declared during a video call where we discussed logistics, "and maybe a new tie to match your colors." My grandmother volunteered to help with tasks my mother might have assisted with, from reviewing final floral arrangements to helping select wedding party gifts. Though she lived 3 hours away, she made the drive to Chicago twice in the following month, staying with us in our guest room and bringing a level of warmth and wisdom to the planning process that I hadn't even realized was missing. Perhaps the most meaningful adjustment was the addition of a special dance at the reception. While Haley would still have her father-daughter dance with David, we decided to add a grandparent-grandson dance with both my grandparents. The band would play Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight," my grandmother's favorite song from her own wedding day, 60 years earlier. My grandmother also accompanied me to my final suit, fitting a task my father would traditionally have done. As I stood on the tailor's platform, she watched with tears in her eyes. "You look so handsome," she said softly. "Just like Richard when he was young." "I hope I have a marriage as strong as yours," I replied, helping her up from her chair as we prepared to leave. She patted my cheek gently. "You will. You and Haley have something special. You see each other clearly and love each other anyway. That's the secret." As the wedding approached, I found myself focusing less on who wouldn't be there and more on the incredible people who would be. My grandparents, who had dropped everything to support me. Haley's loving family, who had welcomed me without reservation. Friends who stood by me through difficult decisions. These were the people who truly embodied what family should be: supportive, honest, and unconditionally loving. With their help, what could have been a day shadowed by absence became something new, a celebration not just of Haley's and my love, but of the family we were choosing to build, founded on respect, boundaries, and genuine care for one another. In the 2 months leading up to our wedding, what had begun as a private family disagreement expanded into a full-blown family rift that drew in relatives from both sides. The first ripple came when my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, called me directly. "Your mother told me what's happening," she began without preamble. "I just want you to know that I think you're being incredibly selfish. Family forgives, Ethan." Before I could even respond, she continued her lecture. "Do you have any idea how this is affecting your mother? She's hardly sleeping. Is your pride really worth hurting her like this?" When I finally managed to get a word in, I calmly explained my position. "Aunt Patricia, this isn't about pride. Brooke physically assaulted me, and neither she nor my parents have acknowledged how serious that is. I'm not asking for a grand apology, just recognition that her behavior was unacceptable. She's your sister. People lose their tempers. Are you really going to throw away your entire family over one little incident?" After several similar conversations with other aunts and uncles, I stopped answering calls from extended family members I wasn't close to. Those who truly knew me and understood the situation, like my cousin Rachel, reached out with more nuanced perspectives. "I get why you're doing this," Rachel said during a coffee meetup. "Brooke has always been allowed to behave however she wants. Someone needed to set a boundary eventually." The family divisions became even more apparent in our extended family group chat. What had once been a place to share vacation, photos, and birthday wishes became a battleground where every innocent comment could spark debate. When my cousin posted congratulations about our upcoming wedding, my aunt immediately responded with a passive-aggressive, "Shame not all the family will be there to celebrate," which set off a 20-message argument. I eventually muted the chat, unable to stomach the constant tension and taking sides. Haley suggested I create a new group just for relatives who were supportive, which proved to be a much healthier space for wedding updates and family connection. Meanwhile, Brooke's behavior escalated from merely difficult to actively malicious. She began posting thinly veiled attacks on social media. "Some people think a wedding is more important than family loyalty, and blood is thicker than water, but apparently not thicker than wedding cake." Childish, but still hurtful to see. More concerning were her attempts to contact Haley directly. First came Facebook messages. "I think you should hear my side of the story before you let Ethan turn you against his whole family." When Haley didn't respond, Brooke escalated to calling Haley's workplace, claiming it was a medical emergency. Fortunately, Haley's supervisor knew about our situation and simply took a message without disrupting Haley's session with a patient. The most disturbing development came when I learned that Brooke had been spreading rumors throughout the family network. According to her, I had allegedly been verbally abusive toward her for years, and the confrontation at our parents' house had been me finally pushing her to her breaking point. She claimed I had lunged at her, and she had struck me in self-defense. This narrative was so far from reality that at first I couldn't believe anyone would accept it. But as comments from distant relatives trickled in, "I had no idea you had anger issues. Ethan, and violence is never the answer, even when provoked." I realized that some people were indeed taking Brooke's version as truth. My parents, rather than correcting these falsehoods, seemed to be enabling them. When directly questioned by my grandmother, my mother hedged. "Well, there are always two sides to every story. Ethan did say some hurtful things that night." Their manipulation took more direct forms as the wedding approached. My father left voicemails about how this rift might affect their will and family inheritance. "We've always planned to leave the lake house to both you and your sister, but if this estrangement continues, we might need to reconsider those arrangements." My mother took a different approach, sending messages designed to trigger maximum guilt. "I just found your baby book while cleaning, looking at those pictures of you as a little boy. I never imagined I wouldn't be at your wedding. I guess a mother's love isn't enough anymore." They even enlisted family friends in their campaign. The Johnsons, who had lived next door during my childhood, called to check in and ended up delivering a clearly rehearsed speech about family reconciliation. Mr. Peterson, my father's golf buddy, whose son I had tutored in calculus, emailed to remind me that parents won't be around forever and I would regret this standoff when it's too late to fix it. All of these tactics might have worked on the old Ethan, the one who had spent his life accommodating Brooke's outbursts and accepting his role as the family peacekeeper, regardless of personal cost. But therapy, Haley's unwavering support, and the clarity that comes with distance had strengthened my resolve. The final confrontation came 1 week before the wedding, when my parents showed up unannounced at our apartment on a Sunday afternoon. Haley was out with her bridesmaids for a final dress fitting, so I faced them alone when I opened the door to their unexpected knock. My mother immediately pulled me into a hug that felt more tactical than affectionate. "Oh, Ethan, we've missed you so much." My father stood behind her, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Son, we need to talk. May we come in?" I hesitated, but ultimately stepped aside to let them enter. They settled on our sofa while I took the armchair across from them, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my mother began, her voice soft and reasonable, "and we've come up with a compromise that should work for everyone." My father nodded. "We propose that Brooke attend just the ceremony, sitting in the back. She won't come to the reception or interact with you at all. That way we can all be there as a family, but you don't have to worry about any incidents. She's your sister, Ethan," my mother added. 20 years from now, when you look at your wedding photos, don't you want your whole family to be there?" I took a deep breath before responding. "I appreciate you coming all this way, but my answer hasn't changed. Brooke physically assaulted me and has shown zero remorse. In fact, she's been actively spreading lies about me. Having her at our wedding in any capacity would send the message that her behavior is acceptable, and it's not." My father's face darkened. "So that's it. You're choosing your pride over your family." "I'm choosing my well-being and Haley's happiness over an unhealthy dynamic that's gone on far too long." I corrected him. "And to be honest, you're the ones making a choice here. You're choosing Brooke's housewarming over your son's wedding." "Because you've put us in an impossible position," my mother cried. "How can we choose between our children?" "You've been choosing Brooke over me my entire life," I replied quietly. "The only difference now is that I'm no longer pretending it doesn't hurt." The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken truth. My father stood up abruptly. "I can see this conversation is going nowhere. If you change your mind, you know how to reach us." My mother lingered a moment longer, tears in her eyes. "I never thought it would come to this. I really thought you'd reconsider." As they prepared to leave, I made one final attempt at connection. "I wish things were different. I wish Brooke could acknowledge what she did and take responsibility. I wish you could see how her behavior has affected me all these years. But mostly I wish you could be happy for me and Haley, even if you don't agree with all of our decisions." My mother just shook her head sadly. My father opened the door without another word, and they walked out of my apartment, and it seemed out of my life, at least for now. After they left, I sat alone in the silent apartment, feeling strangely calm. There was pain, yes, but also a profound sense of having stood my ground with integrity. For perhaps the first time, I had prioritized my own well-being over the fragile peace of a dysfunctional family system. It hurt, but it also felt right. When Haley returned home and I told her about the visit, she wrapped her arms around me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "and I promise you our wedding will be beautiful and filled with love, even without them there." I believed her. And as the final week before our wedding began, I focused on the people who would be present rather than those who had chosen to be absent. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and perfect, with just enough autumn crispness in the air to make the day feel magical. I woke up in a hotel suite, surrounded by my groomsmen, Jason, my best man, Michael, Haley's brother, and two close friends from work, Taylor and Ryan. Following tradition, Haley and I had spent the night apart, with her staying at her parents' house, surrounded by her bridesmaids. As we got ready, the atmosphere was light and supportive. Jason kept everyone laughing with stories from our college days, while Michael ensured we stayed on schedule. I felt surprisingly calm despite the emotional roller coaster of the previous months. "How are you doing, really?" Jason asked quietly, while the others were busy adjusting their ties in the mirror. "I'm good," I replied, and meant it. "There's a part of me that's sad my parents aren't here, but honestly, I'm focusing on who is here, not who isn't." He nodded approvingly. "That's the right mindset. And for what it's worth, I think they're the ones missing out, not you." Around 11, there was a knock at the suite door. Ryan opened it to reveal my grandparents, both dressed impeccably. My grandmother wore a silver dress that complemented our wedding colors perfectly, while my grandfather looked distinguished in his charcoal suit with a navy blue tie. "We thought we'd come early," my grandmother explained, embracing me warmly. "Eleanor wanted to make sure your boutonniere was pinned correctly," my grandfather added with a wink. "She doesn't trust these young fellows to know the difference between north and south on a lapel." Their presence filled a space in my heart that had been aching. As my grandmother fussed over my tie and my grandfather shared a flask of 30-year-old scotch with all of us, "Just a sip for courage, boys," I felt the weight of my parents' absence lighten considerably. We were about to leave for the venue when another knock came at the door. When Taylor opened it, I was shocked to see my cousin Rachel standing there with her husband Dan, and behind them my mother's brother Uncle James and his wife Aunt Sarah. "We hope we're not intruding," Rachel said hesitantly, "but we wanted to see you before the ceremony." I invited them in, confused but pleased by their unexpected appearance. Uncle James stepped forward first, his expression serious. "Ethan, I want you to know that Sarah and I have been thinking hard about this situation. We initially sided with your parents because, well, that seemed like the expected thing to do. But after hearing the full story and seeing how they've handled this, we realized we were wrong." He extended his hand. "We're here for your wedding, not Brooke's housewarming, if you'll still have us." Emotion welled up as I shook his hand, and then found myself pulled into a firm hug. Aunt Sarah was next, her eyes damp. "Your parents are making a mistake," she said simply. "We didn't want to make the same one." Rachel explained that several other family members had also had changes of heart after learning more details about the situation, particularly Brooke's attempts to spread misinformation and her lack of any apology. "Some couldn't change plans this late, but they wanted me to tell you they're with you in spirit." This unexpected show of support gave the day an additional layer of meaning. These family members had made a conscious choice to stand with me not out of obligation, but out of a genuine belief that it was the right thing to do. Their presence was a powerful statement that family loyalty shouldn't require accepting mistreatment. By the time we arrived at the venue, my emotions were running high, but in the best possible way. The converted barn looked even more beautiful than I had imagined, with white chairs set up in neat rows, floral arrangements in navy and silver adorning the aisle, and twinkling lights, creating a magical canopy overhead. I waited with my grandfather in a small room adjacent to the ceremony space, listening to the string quartet play as guests were seated. Through the partially open door, I could see some of the arrivals. Haley's extended family, our friends from various chapters of our lives, colleagues who had become much more than just people we worked with. Every face represented someone who had chosen to celebrate with us, and that felt profound. "Nervous?" my grandfather asked, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "Not about marrying Haley," I replied honestly. "Just hoping everything goes smoothly." He turned to face me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Want to know a secret? I was terrified when I married your grandmother. Not because I had any doubts about her, God knows I didn't, but because I was sure I'd trip or forget my vows or do something else to embarrass myself." "Did you embarrass yourself, I mean?" He chuckled. "I stepped on her train and nearly pulled her over backward during our first dance. She never let me forget it." His expression grew more serious. "But you know what? 60 years later, that's just a funny story we tell. The important parts, the love, the commitment, the life we built together, that's what lasted." When it was time, we took our positions at the back of the aisle. The music changed to the processional we had selected, and one by one the wedding party made their entrances. Then came the moment everyone stood and turned toward the back, waiting for Haley. She appeared on her father's arm, and my breath caught. Her dress was simple and elegant, her hair swept up with a few tendrils framing her face, and her smile when she saw me was radiant. In that moment, any lingering sadness about who wasn't there completely vanished. The only person I could see was her. As the ceremony began, my grandfather stood proudly at my side, his hand occasionally squeezing my shoulder in support. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this man to be married today?" my grandfather's voice rang out clear and strong. "His grandmother and I do with all our hearts." The exchange of vows went perfectly. Haley and I had written our own, and as I promised to build a family with her based on mutual respect, understanding, and unwavering support, I saw tears glistening in many eyes throughout the audience. When she vowed to stand by me through all of life's challenges, always as a partner and never as a judge, I felt the truth of those words in my soul. After the rings were exchanged and we were pronounced husband and wife, we walked back down the aisle together through a shower of silver confetti, hand in hand into our new life. The reception was everything we had hoped for. The barn had been transformed with more twinkling lights, tables adorned with navy linens and silver accents, and centerpieces of white roses and blue hydrangeas. The band played a perfect mix of classics and contemporary songs that kept the dance floor full all night. One of the most touching moments came during the toasts. My grandfather stood glass raised and addressed the room with the wisdom of his years. When Eleanor and I married 60 years ago, my father told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "Richard, a good marriage isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about building something perfect together, brick by brick, day by day. Ethan and Haley, watching you together, I can see that you've already laid a strong foundation. You've faced challenges that would have broken weaker couples, and you've emerged stronger. May you continue building something beautiful together for the next 60 years and beyond." The father-daughter dance between Haley and her dad was beautiful and traditional. But when it came time for our special grandparent dance, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. My grandmother joined my grandfather and me on the dance floor, and the three of us swayed together to Sinatra's timeless voice, singing about seeing someone lovely. In that circle of their arms, I felt the truest meaning of family, not just blood relation, but unwavering love and support through life's hardest moments. Throughout the evening, I found myself surrounded by people who had chosen to be there, who had stood by us through difficult decisions, who celebrated our joy without reservation. We danced, laughed, ate amazing food, and created memories that would last a lifetime. As Haley and I cut the cake together, feeding each other small bites amid laughter and applause, I realized that what could have been a day shadowed by absence had instead become a powerful affirmation of what family should truly be. Not obligation, or enabling or false peace at any cost, but genuine love, respect, and the courage to stand for what's right. When we finally departed through a tunnel of sparklers held by our cheering guests, climbing into the vintage car that would take us to our hotel, I felt nothing but gratitude and joy. My parents had made their choice, and I had made mine. And looking at Haley's radiant face beside me, I knew without doubt that I had chosen well. After the whirlwind of our wedding day, Haley and I escaped to New Zealand for our 2-week honeymoon. The dramatic landscapes of mountains, fjords, and endless coastlines provided the perfect backdrop for beginning our married life. Far from the family drama and wedding stress, we hiked through native forests, kayaked in crystal-clear waters, and spent evenings stargazing from the deck of our secluded cabin. It was during one of these quiet evenings, a glass of local wine in hand, and the Southern Cross twinkling overhead, that we finally had the space to process everything that had happened. "I keep thinking about your grandfather's toast," Haley said, nestling against me as we shared a blanket against the cool night air, about building something perfect together, brick by brick. I nodded, watching the stars reflect in her eyes. "I think that's what we're doing right now, laying the foundation for our family, deciding what values we want to build on." "What values do you think are most important?" she asked, turning to face me fully. I considered the question carefully. Honesty, respect, the courage to set boundaries, and the wisdom to know when to be flexible, and unconditional love that doesn't mean unconditional acceptance of harmful behavior. "Those sound like lessons hard won," she observed gently. "They are, but I wouldn't trade them even with everything that happened. These past months showed me who truly stands with me, and they forced me to decide what kind of man, what kind of husband, what kind of future father I want to be." We spent many evenings like this discussing how we would handle conflicts in our own relationship, how we would approach parenthood if we were blessed with children, and how we would navigate future interactions with my family. These weren't always easy conversations, but they were necessary and ultimately strengthening. When we returned home to Chicago, reality awaited in the form of 2 letters that had been delivered during our absence. Both bore my parents' handwriting, one addressed to me and one to Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Marshall, their first acknowledgement of our marriage. I stared at the envelopes for a long time before opening mine. Inside was a 3-page letter from my mother, her normally perfect handwriting, showing signs of emotion in its uneven slant. "Dear Ethan," it began, "by the time you read this, you will be married, and your father and I will have missed one of the most important days of your life. I can't stop thinking about that, about the empty chairs where we should have been sitting, about the mother-son dance that didn't happen, about all the moments we can never get back." The letter continued with a mixture of regret, explanation, and tentative steps toward reconciliation. My mother acknowledged that they had perhaps been too protective of Brooke over the years, though she stopped short of admitting any real wrongdoing. She expressed hope that with time our family can heal these wounds, and suggested a meeting after Haley and I returned from our honeymoon. My father had added a brief postscript in his blocky handwriting. "Son, I've never been good with words, but I miss you. Call when you're ready." The second letter, addressed to both Haley and me, contained a check for a substantial amount with wedding gift written in the memo line, and a short note wishing us happiness. It felt like both an olive branch and a way to assuage their guilt. After reading the letters, I didn't immediately reach for the phone. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Lawson, the therapist who had helped me navigate the pre-wedding family crisis. With her guidance, I worked through my complex feelings, the pull of familial obligation, the lingering hurt, the cautious hope, and the firm resolve to maintain the boundaries I had established. "Reconciliation is possible," Dr. Lawson told me during one session, "but it requires acknowledgement, accountability, and changed behavior from all parties. It's not about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about addressing it honestly and committing to a healthier relationship moving forward." Armed with this perspective, I eventually called my parents 3 weeks after our return. The conversation was awkward but civil. We agreed to meet for lunch at a neutral restaurant, just the three of us, to begin the slow work of rebuilding our relationship. That first meeting revealed how far we had to go. My mother cried when she saw me, embracing me tightly as if I had returned from war. My father shook my hand formally before pulling me into a stiff hug. We made small talk about the wedding, which they asked few questions about, and the honeymoon, which provided safer conversational ground, and when the subject of Brooke inevitably arose, it became clear that while my parents might miss me, they weren't yet ready to acknowledge the fundamental problems in our family dynamic. "She's having a hard time with all of this," my mother said, picking at her salad. "She feels very excluded." "I understand that's difficult for her," I replied carefully, "but my boundary remains the same. I'm open to rebuilding a relationship with Brooke when she's ready to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for her actions." My father frowned. "Can't you just let it go, son, for the sake of family peace?" "Dad, that's exactly the pattern I'm trying to break. Sweeping problems under the rug for the sake of family peace isn't actually peaceful. It just allows harmful behavior to continue." We left that lunch with plans to meet again the following month, but with the understanding that real healing would take time and might never completely restore what was lost. And I was okay with that. The relationship I was building with my parents now was more honest, even if more limited than what we had before. Meanwhile, my relationship with my grandparents deepened significantly. We established a tradition of Sunday evening video calls, where they would share family stories I'd never heard before and offer wisdom gained from their decades together. Once a month, either they would drive to Chicago or Haley, and I would visit them, spending weekends, playing cards, cooking together, and simply enjoying each other's presence. You know, my grandmother said during one such visit, her hands busy kneading bread dough while I helped, "I've been thinking about family a lot lately. Blood matters, of course it does, but what matters more is how people treat each other. Your grandfather's brother didn't speak to him for 15 years over a business disagreement. Missed our wedding, the birth of your mother, everything. When he finally came around, he expected to pick up right where they left off. Did they?" I asked, fascinated by this family history I'd never heard. "Eventually, yes, but it was different, and that's okay. Some relationships get pruned back by life circumstances, but that doesn't mean they can't grow again in new ways." The holidays presented our first major family challenge. Thanksgiving was simpler. We spent it with Haley's family as we had the previous year, but Christmas required more navigation. We decided to host a Christmas Eve dinner at our apartment for my grandparents, Haley's parents, and a few close friends. For Christmas Day, we accepted my parents' invitation with the explicit understanding that Brooke would not be present unless she was ready to have an honest conversation about what had happened. Brooke chose not to engage, instead spending Christmas with friends in Colorado. My parents seemed disappointed but respected the boundary. Our Christmas Day visit was short but pleasant, with everyone making a visible effort to focus on positive interactions rather than dwelling on the elephant in the room. As the months passed, our new normal took shape. Haley and I created our own traditions and built a life centered on mutual respect and open communication. We maintained boundaries with my family while leaving the door open for healthier relationships in the future. My parents gradually showed small signs of growth, though real acknowledgement of the patterns that led to our rift remained elusive. 3 months after our wedding, Haley and I received the news that would add another layer to our family story. We were expecting our first child. As we prepared to become parents ourselves, the lessons from our wedding journey took on new significance. We were not just building a marriage, we were establishing the foundation for the next generation. I want our child to grow up understanding that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, I told Haley as we lay in bed one night, my hand resting on her still flat stomach. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, and that family should be a source of support, not stress. They will, she assured me, covering my hand with hers. Because they'll learn by watching us. That's what your grandparents did for you, even if you didn't realize it at the time. They showed you a different way, and when the moment came, you recognized it and chose it. Looking back now on the turbulent path to our wedding day, I see that what felt like an ending, the painful rift with my parents and sister, was actually a beginning. It was the start of a more authentic life, one where I no longer contorted myself to maintain a false peace or accepted treatment that diminished my worth. The journey hasn't been easy, and it continues to evolve. My relationship with my parents is slowly healing, though it may never be what I once imagined. Brooke remains distant, still unwilling to acknowledge her role in the conflict. But my life is rich with genuine connections. With Haley, with my grandparents, with friends who stood by me, and soon with the child who will carry forward the lessons we've learned so painfully. If there's one thing I would share with anyone facing a similar situation, it's this. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most. But those boundaries aren't walls meant to punish. They're foundations for healthier relationships. And sometimes the family that sustains you isn't the one you were born into, but the one you build through choice, commitment, and courage. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? Did your grandparents ever step up in a way your parents couldn't? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of growth through challenge. Thank you for listening. And remember, the family you create with love and intention is just as real and valuable as the one you were born into.